Hello and welcome back to the Down the Forest Path Knitting podcast. A while ago, I did a video about why knitting patterns are expensive and why it's wrong to rip off designers by just like taking the pattern when someone uploads it for free online when it's a paid for pattern. So today, I want to look at it from a little bit of a different perspective, and I want to talk to you about red flags that you can spot before you buy a knitting pattern that should give you an indication just not to buy that particular pattern and to go for something else. Because I fully acknowledge that knitting patterns are expensive. It isn't like always feasible to spend like €8, €10, €20 on a knitting pattern. And the last thing you want is to spend it on one that's not well written and that leaves you with a project that you're not happy with. So today, let's go through all of these red flag indicators that I've collected so that you know when you spend your money, you're getting your money's worth. So the first thing that I do when I consider buying a knitting pattern is to check a few very simple things on the patterns page on Ravelry. And that's something that I kind of always do and that I found really avoids the bulk of badly written patterns. The first thing I check is the clarity rating. So if you look on your Ravelry page and you have a pattern open and a pattern page open, and then you look on the right, there is usually a little box that has information about how people have rated the pattern, and this will also give you a clarity rating. Now, that only applies if like a certain number of people have rated the pattern, and that might not always be the case. But if you have a pattern that a decent number of people have knit, then it should have a clarity rating, and sometimes you will be baffled by how bad this clarity rating is. Like there's this one huge knitting pattern designer who did a whole series of patterns that have the same kind of like motif in them. So you would think it's like the same lace motif in the yoke. It's like a I think she has a like sweater, a cardigan, a hat, and everything with the same lace pattern. So you would think like it's a safe bet if the sweater has a good clarity rating that the cardigan also will. No, definitely not. So if you look through the whole series, you see varying clarity ratings from like 2.5 or something like that to 4 point something, which is actually good. So when I was considering making a pattern from this collection, then I actually checked through all of them and I picked the one with the highest clarity rating because I did not want to do a lace sweater that people have said is super unclear. Something that I also do is I check the comments. So if you look at the top of the pattern page, there should be a header that says comments. And if a pattern is super unclear, usually people will be quite angry about it. And they will leave comments, angry comments saying, this stitch count is off, that stitch count is off, I don't understand, this is really not clear at all. And in which case, that for me is also a red flag for not buying the pattern. Then further indicators on the Ravelry page. I mean, I feel like this is a bit of an unfair measurement, but something that I also do is I look and I see how many people have already knit the pattern, because usually the really huge patterns, they have something going for them in the sense of clarity. So if you have a pattern and you see that it's been knit by like 2,000 people, then it's probably going to be okay, especially if combined with a good clarity rating. And I mean, a lot of the knitting community works on word of mouth, so people keep recommending these patterns to each other. So I always feel that if like a lot of people have knitted, then it's usually kind of a recommendation in and of itself, because they will have heard about it from friends and stuff like that, and it's usually quite a good sign. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try patterns that have very few projects, because otherwise newer designers will just never stand a chance. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more established, then that's also just an easy thing to do. Something you should also always do when you're checking out a pattern's Ravelry page is to go to the project photos. And that is because designers will notoriously pick the most flattering pictures of their design. So they will pick the most beautifully staged photos, and they will kind of hide the problem areas of a pattern on purpose, inadvertently. Yeah, like you make up your own mind, but I've definitely seen a few designers who have like quite consistent fit issues, and they always stage the photos, like the modeled photos of their garments, in a way that you just won't see this specific fit issue. The most glaring one is that a lot of designers for colorwork sweaters have a bit of an issue where their sweaters kind of strangle people in the front and hang quite low in the back, and they just won't show you the back of a sweater. I feel like if there is like sweater patterns and you just can't see the back, that's a bit of a red flag in itself. And the way to go around that is to just go to the project photos and have a look and see if someone uploaded one that has the back in it, and just see how it fits you, because the last thing you want to do is to knit a like really heavy wool sweater and it's just sitting like this, choking you out. Now that is most of the time because they just don't add short rows, and I've definitely knit sweaters without short rows that sit quite well, or omitted short rows on sweaters that came out sitting quite well. But I think there's also a bit of a like body type thing, and there are certain body types you just can't really like do without short rows. If you have like a specific shoulder shape, for example, or a specific neck shape. So it's good to kind of know that about yourself, and then to really look out for this, because it is just really annoying. I also, and that's not just for sweaters but for anything, will check out the comments on the project pages. So a lot of the time, if you sort the project by most favorites, then the first ones that come up will have quite extensive project notes that people have found helpful, and that's why they left a favorite, or very beautiful pictures, or both. But if you go through, you'll usually see like what people said about the pattern, and a lot of the time for like gloves, I find it quite practical if people say, oh, it's too tight around the hand. For hats and for anything that's really gauge dependent, if they talk about the gauge, there's one designer on Ravelry who has a very loose gauge, and people just struggle with that massively. So it's always good to check that out as well. And if this throws up any red flag that you just don't want to deal with, then you just don't buy the pattern and you look for something else. Something that I also avoid in paid for patterns is a very limited size range, because to me that always comes across as a signal that the designer just does not really know how to draft clothes, and that doesn't make me confident in their pattern writing skills in the first place. Now, that is something that I specifically look out for in paid for patterns, because what I've seen before is that people upload garment patterns like sweaters, cardigans and stuff for free on Ravelry, because they knit a cardigan for themselves in their size with a collarwork motif or something like that, and that's how it worked, and that was the stitch count, and it's just basically a written up recipe of their personal cardigan, and if you have a similar size you can make it for free. And I think that's fine. I don't want to like go into depth about size inclusivity, why it's important and things like that, but I feel like if someone is just uploading a pattern that they designed for their own body and is saying, well, if you have a similar body type, then this is how I did it, and you can do it too with these like stitch counts, and maybe you can adjust it a tiny little bit if you need to, then I feel like that's completely fair, and thank you for uploading free patterns. It's very, very appreciated. But if it is a pattern that I pay for, then I expect that the pattern will have a decent size range, and that the pattern designer knows how to like draft and adapt things to fit different body shapes, because otherwise you're just leaving me alone with having to adapt it myself without any guidance. Like, I don't need hand holding the whole way through, but I do at least want to know that the designer kind of knows how to do it, so that I have like some stuff to look out for in the pattern that will be helpful for me along the way. Another little trick that I found super helpful is that if you're looking to buy a pattern from a specific designer, check to see if the designer has free patterns, and then download the free pattern. It doesn't matter if you want to make it or not, and just check through it and see how it's written. And usually that gives you quite a good indication of if that pattern is written in a style that you want to deal with or rather not. Because there is quality differences and there's also cultural differences. I found that knitting patterns from Germany and Scandinavia are often a little bit more sparsely written, and knitting patterns from the US are very handholdy and go very much in depth. I think both has its advantages and disadvantages. I feel like with the Scandi style knitting patterns, you sometimes like a little bit left to your own devices, which can be scary if you're a beginner. And on the other hand, I feel like with the US knitting patterns, it can be very frustrating if there's just a super simple thing you have to do and then someone wrote 2 pages for that and you just have to keep reading through it. I always think about how much paper that wastes, but that's kind of beside the points. So if you do want to buy, like, I don't know, let's say an Andrea Mori pattern, just see if she has like one free one, download that, look at it, see how it's written, and if you like the style it's written in, if you have any clarity issues or if you have any concerns, and if you do, then you just don't buy the paid for pattern. But if you're like, oh, this is great, this is written very well, and her patterns in general are written very well, then you just go ahead and buy it. So that's also how I've avoided a lot of tears and disappointment in the past. And then there's one last thing that I do to avoid disappointment with knitting patterns, and it might be a little bit controversial, but I sometimes check the designer's social media accounts, because there are just some things that I just really don't like if designers do them, and because most knitting pattern designers have really small businesses, I'm giving the money directly, so I want to know it's going somewhere that I'm kind of okay with. So like one huge red flag for me is if the designers have test calls on their Instagram, let's say, where one of the requirements for entry is that you provide free marketing if you're a test knitter. Because like I've made a passionate case for test knitting in the past. There's a video here. I have done a test knit. I like doing it. I would do it again. But where I draw the line, so for me it's like I feel like the knitting community is big and small at the same time, and most people are really not getting rich from the work that they do in the knitting community. And I understand that a small pattern designer does not have the money to pay knitting testers for their projects in all different sizes and stuff like that. And it's already nice if they give you like a free pattern on top or a voucher or whatever, and you get the pattern for free in exchange for testing it, and that's okay. But where I draw the line is if I'm expected to provide free advertisement, because that's a paid for job, on top of test knitting the pattern. Because I've seen things where designers have recruited an absurd number of test knitters, and it was quite clear that they didn't actually need all of these test knitters for feedback, but they needed them for providing the marketing and creating a social media hype around it. And I gladly will post if I do a test knit about a test knit, completely like unincentivized, because I'm excited about it. But I've seen stuff where designers were like, oh, you have to do like 2 stories and a post, and like you have to tag the business on your private Instagram page. And sorry, but like no, that's a paid job, and I'm not providing that for free. And if you do that, then I'm also not going to buy your patterns, because for me that is just comes across as quite unprofessional and is quite a red flag. And I also like, I mean, like, I've talked about stuff before on this channel, and you know me a little bit, so you know that like sustainability is quite important to me personally. So if I go on a designer's page and I see stuff like them being like, oh, climate change isn't real and stuff like that, then I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna give you my money. And that's a red flag in itself. That doesn't mean the pattern's badly written or stuff like that, but I prefer giving my money to small businesses who I thinks like at least a little bit similarly to me in certain ways that are important to me. So that's basically it. I know the last 2 ones were not super functional, so it's not like you can't knit or find good patterns from designers like that, but I just tend to really try to stay away from designers who create quite a bit of drama as well. I just really don't want that, because I find that like, I don't know, I have not been knitting forever, but there have been a few huge drama things happening in the community since I started that fortunately had absolutely zero to do with me, and I wanted to definitely stay that way, but some people have behaved in ways that I would kind of feel a bit sad if I'd made something from their patterns and I would now still wear it and see it every time. So I like to kind of like be on the lookout a little bit for that. And I know that like it's not quite the same as the rest of the advice I gave you that actually helps you to avoid badly written patterns, but if you're anything like me with that kind of stuff, then you might also find it hard to divorce the object from the designer, and I think that's still quite helpful to know how to maybe be on the lookout for that. So that's it from me this week. I know this was a little bit of a short video. I hope I will be able to talk to you again soon. I am like, how do you say, and have fingers in different pies, something like that. I'm kind of rotating at the moment. I have a lot of projects going on. I have a lot of things that are happening, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of the stuff with you relatively soon. I have so much to do that I wasn't there for a few weeks. I'm sorry for that. I hope I can be a little bit more in my normal 2-week rhythm again, but we'll see. I might have to disappoint you there, but yeah, just let me know what you thought of this video, and if you have further tips, then leave them in the comments. There's usually a really good discussion going on after a while below, and it might be helpful to your fellow knitters. And then I hope I see you again super soon. Bye!